Have you ever felt that chill down your spine when you're alone on a dark, empty road? That nagging feeling that you're not really alone? Well, for Mark, that feeling became a terrifying reality one fateful night on Highway 47, a road where the dead don't stay buried and the living are never safe. It was a cold, moonless night when Mark decided to take the long drive home. He had been visiting his sister in the next town over, and though it was late, he was eager to get back to his own bed. The GPS suggested he take Highway 47, a shortcut he'd never used before. Little did he know, this decision would change his life forever. The highway was eerily quiet, flanked by dense woods on either side. The only sound was the hum of his car engine and the occasional crunch of gravel under his tires. The road was poorly lit, with long stretches of darkness broken only by the faint glow of his headlights. Mark tightened his grip on the steering wheel, trying to shake off the unease creeping up his spine. About 20 minutes into the drive, he noticed something strange. A figure stood on the side of the road, barely visible in the dim light. As he got closer, he saw it was a young woman, dressed in a tattered white dress, her hair matted and wet. She was waving her arms, signaling for him to stop. Mark hesitated. Something about her felt off, but his conscience got the better of him. What if she was in trouble? He pulled over and rolled down the passenger window. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. The woman leaned in, her face pale and gaunt. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I need a ride, just to the next town." Mark nodded, though every fiber of his being screamed at him to drive away. She climbed into the car, and the temperature inside seemed to drop instantly. He turned up the heat, but it did nothing to dispel the cold. As they drove, the woman sat silently, staring straight ahead. Mark tried to make small talk, but she didn't respond. He glanced at her reflection in the rearview mirror and froze. Her face was twisted into a grotesque smile, her eyes black as coal. He blinked, and when he looked again, she was back to normal, staring blankly ahead. His heart raced. Where exactly are you headed?" he stammered. "You'll know when we get there," she replied, her voice now hollow and echoing. Mark's hands shook as he gripped the wheel. The road seemed endless, the trees closing in around him. He glanced at the GPS, but the screen was glitching, showing only static. His phone had no signal either. He was completely cut off. Suddenly, the woman pointed to a narrow, overgrown path leading into the woods. "Turn here," she commanded. Mark's instinct screamed at him to refuse, but his body moved on its own, as if controlled by some unseen force. The car bumped along the uneven path, branches scraping against the windows. The air grew thicker, and a foul smell filled the car, like rotting flesh. Finally, they reached a clearing. In the center stood an old, crumbling house, its windows shattered and doors hanging off their hinges. The woman turned to him, her face now a mask of pure terror. "This is where it happened," she whispered. "This is where he killed me." Mark's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about? Who killed you?" Before she could answer, the car's engine died. The headlights flickered and went out, plunging them into darkness. When Mark turned to look at her, she was gone. The passenger seat was empty, but the door was still closed. Panicked, he fumbled for his phone, but it was dead. He tried to start the car, but it wouldn't turn over. The only sound was the wind howling through the trees, carrying with it faint, distant screams. Suddenly, the car's interior light flickered on, and Mark saw her reflection in the rearview mirror. She was in the back seat, her face inches from his, her eyes wide and filled with rage. "You shouldn't have stopped," she hissed. "Now you're one of us." Mark screamed and threw open the car door, stumbling into the cold night. He ran blindly through the woods, branches tearing at his clothes, until he finally burst onto the highway. A passing truck nearly hit him, but the driver stopped and helped him into the cab. When Mark looked back, The woods were silent and still. There was no sign of the house, the path, or the woman. The truck driver asked him what had happened, but Mark couldn't bring himself to explain. He knew no one would believe him. To this day, Mark refuses to drive on Highway 47, but locals say that if you're foolish enough to take that road at night, you might see a young woman in a white dress standing on the side of the road waiting for her next victim. So, the next time you're driving alone on a deserted highway and you see someone waiting on the side of the road, think twice before you stop. Because not all hitchhikers are looking for a ride. Some are looking for revenge.